Welcome one and all to this not so beautiful Friday, where Dad Saves America, I believe is called this channel, which is a channel I'm not particularly interested in, but it popped, or I don't know, I should say, but it popped into my feed. And here he talks to this Chinese lady who is Chinese of origin, but clearly Dutch of last name, presumably married into it. And they talk about how beauty cures communism. And I think this is a very interesting topic because communism is essentially code for the pursuit of ugly and grimy. And she talks about it, and I think it's interesting. And he talks about something else, and I think it's interesting. So I want to talk about both of them as they go. So off we go.
But you were in a society telling you that you should all look the same, you should not stand out, you should not wear, if you wear makeup, you'll be beaten by the Red Guard. And yet, after that entire upbringing, you see an American movie and your fundamental humanity recognizes what beauty is, recognizes something pleasing, recognizes like that dress is beautiful on that woman. I just think that's really incredible.
I'm going to take a pause here. So, he said something very interesting. He described the communism as essentially this pursuit of sameness, and that's accurate. That's why it creates class systems and that sort of stuff. But what I think is even more interesting is that if one injects a little bit of Orwellian understanding in the modern era, linguistics specifically, one starts seeing something peculiar. For example, nowadays, it's not about all being the same or looking the same, for example. It is in fact changed dramatically. In an Orwellian fashion, it's taken the concept of difference, diversity, if you will, and used diversity and difference as a concept to steal the concept of sameness and eat it up. So, while people look different aesthetically, and by different I of course mean bloody awful, right? Meaning they do all sorts of crazy things like tattoo everything they have, or I don't know, add artificial horns, of have hair of colors that make no sense, with cuts that are frigging weird, etc., all in the name of individualism. There's very little individual about it because everybody is fundamentally pursuing their own individual within the framework of the trend that surrounds them. So whoever is, some people are slightly more conformist in the sense that they try to look more like the trend, and some people are more conformist in the sense that they try to look as different from the trend as possible. The rebel archetype would be the individual that attempts to exit all of this framework, as an example. Meaning, if he or she wants to look more traditional or, more... she uses a great term later, which is classy. One can go that route. If one doesn't, and so on and so forth. Because what is fundamentally attractive in the rebel archetype is the confidence of not having to fit into a flock. Now, the difference in modern times, I would think, is that the flock doesn't need to look all the same. The uniform is changed. It's not the uniform of everybody's in fact wearing a uniform. It's now a multiform, but it's a uniform in and of itself, and one can spot the trends. It's a little bit like when the fellas notice women with no septum rings and go like, oh, lunatic alert. That's a uniform. These are signals. Nowadays they're called, I believe, red flags, ironically. Interesting color choice. But so my remark here is that one should not think that, at least in my opinion, that wearing brown turns you into a communist because you're wearing brown like everybody else around you. You could well look as individualistic as you like. Use your body as much of a canvas as you like. but in the mind, you're all about sameness. Right? Diversity is great in everything: skin color, body mass, intelligence, whatever you like, except for the one thing, which is difference of thought. For example, opposition, tolerance within one's thought. It's one of those ironies, and that's why I brought Orwell forth, because for example, all of these pathologically absurd people that, use pronouns now, they've even stolen grammar. I mean, it's just whatever, right? And the moment in which I, for example, to any degree question the veracity of the persona they are attempting to portray to me, and essentially demanding that I accept wholesale, the moment in which I in any way question that, or counter that, or am not prepared to accept that, that's not allowed. That's suddenly I'm in blasphemy law territory. So it's fascinating how intolerant this actually is, even though it cloaks itself with tolerance. So in the same sense, the sameness that the dad describes, and the truthfulness of beauty and of positive traits as a general thing, which of course imply natural diversity and inequality, pretty important, and superiority and inferiority. Beauty better than ugliness. Strong better than weak. Tall better than short. Rich better than poor, and so on and so forth. What communism does is essentially attempts desperately to make you lie to yourself about these truths. And it uses the flock, the belonging to a flock, this attraction that apparently humans have, as well as animals, I guess, in order to produce an artificial strength of idea through numbers. That's one of the reasons why democracy is vomit-inducing. It's just a tool of the communist. It's fascinating, this. But anyway, so this is a thing I wanted to touch on, and now the lady's going to answer, and I think she says some stuff that's really interesting, so I'm going to comment on that as well. Double reaction within one. Wow.
Because that's absolutely, you have no idea that I grew up in an environment that's totally devoid of beauty. Absolutely devoid of beauty. And because beauty was condemned as bourgeois, bad, and proletarian is good. Proletarian is what? It's being poor, it's not even real proletarian, but being coarse. If you curse, it's good. And that we see the same thing happening here in America. And so reject class. Class is bad, and we want to be like the dirt poor peasant. That's everyone's goal, is to be more like a proletarian as possible. And
I'm going to pause here. It's very important that it is understood, at least in my personal opinion, what she means by class. What she means by class is not an abstract term that generates collectives. She means the pursuit of some form of quintessential elegance. That's what she means by class. As an Italian fellow, I have a bit of an advantage compared to my English-speaking friends because we have terminology that exists. The Italian culture has terminology that has developed over time to, in fact, emphasize class. Italians see themselves as superior culturally to many other cultures for many justified reasons, potentially. Many not justified, certainly not today. But for instance, one term that Italians have is Americanata. What that means is it's something that is American and therefore brash and crass and inelegant, right? To make an analogy, an American V8 is a great example. When you compare an American V8 to an Italian V8, for instance, an Italian V8 is small in displacement. It has a beautiful sound. It has it has speed and compactness and elegance. Yeah, it breaks all the time, but it's okay. If it worked all the time, it would be an Audi. Right? So, whereas by comparison, an American V8 is gruff. It's burbly, it's deep, it's slow and lumbering and heavy, and that. Being dressed in a Hawaiian shirt is an Americanata. Okay, wearing so much makeup that you look like you belong in a in a red light district in Amsterdam is an Americanata, and so on. So it's a classless behavior. Okay, that's what she means by class. Now that term then gets appropriated and is utilized to mean the concept of a collective. So then she says this leads to a essentially philosophical rejection of the improvement, and leads down to the most lowbrow behaviors that there are. There's an interesting perspective that I want to add to this. When I was young, all of these influences that she's talking about were absolutely real. However, I was born in the 80s, which means we came after let's call it a short window of history in which everybody went like, do you know that communism is absolutely woeful and needs to be rejected all around? It doesn't mean that ideologically it was, but it does mean that practically speaking, everybody got bored of it. It was just dreadful and boring and ugly and pathetic and stupid and criminal. Right? And it's everywhere. Because while I'm Italian, I'm also from Yugoslavia. So I was born under communism. Okay? Poverty everywhere. It's just inflation at numbers that are presently, well, probably being replicated, to be honest, globally, which is really annoying. But anyway, point is, it was a resurgence time. The baby boom. Right? Where there was optimism and we're all striving towards better and everybody needs to go to university to get a better chance and so on and so forth. And in this era instead, it's clearly devolving and going back into like, oh, all of this growth is awful and undesirable and we need to regulate everything and da 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 da. And it's so sad to see it happen in North America of all places. But you see, North America, even from the 70s and 80s, because that's what the chap said, you watch an American beauty film and you see beauty in it, right? North America, despite being full of Americanate back in the day, as it was now, as it is now, as it was even before, probably, right? Has figured out a different archetype, which is the archetype of a different philosophical paradigm, which is the paradigm of individualism. There's absolutely no need at all for groups. Alinsky fought that, obviously, by inventing but reigniting the idea that group influence generates power. Right? But the American dream is all about not chasing power. It's about chasing status, chasing richness, chasing individual development. Right? Now, some of that then can devolve into that, whatever, this gets really complicated. Point is, I was a child of this resurgence. And what I found very uncomfortable was the stiffness of the resurgence. And all of the political communism ideas that were coming back when I was a teenager were in absolute full force. And in schools, it was the worst place possible for them to exist. They were everywhere. So you would have these yearly protests that would happen for this or the other reform to the education system that were or were not happening. Meaning, if there was a reform, we would protest. If there wasn't a reform, we would protest. And the protests looked like an occupation of the school premises. And I was a willing participant in all of this. Not that I had any idea what I was doing. I once, in fact, had the honest and earnest opportunity to discuss this with one of the professors who was a strong proponent of all of these things. She had orange hair, you can imagine the archetype. I mean, anybody that puts rust prevention on their hair must be a commie. There's no alternative option. They're classless after all. And she asked me, no, she didn't ask me, but she was like, why are you here, etc. I said, I have no idea, everybody else is. So that was really interesting because it stole the concept of rebellion, a protest, right, which is one of its expressions, and transformed it into a tool of conformity. It's absolutely fascinating, and this has happened before as well. All of these movement, communism is the chief of all of these, because it says, we're all the same, we all need to strive for sameness, we all need to strive for the biggest flock there is. It's a religion. And so I started rebelling towards that, for example. I was rebelling towards both machineries at the same time. So you had the prim and proper preppies, so to speak. Not preppies, what are they called? I think they are called preppies. I don't know. I foreigner. Anyway, the whole like never swear and be all like nice and stuff and be the top of the class and blah, blah, blah. And I was rebelling during and especially later towards my, let's be part of the proletariat thing. And now I am in this position right now, in which I think people would call me a libertarian, most likely. But, you know, I just don't like to be part of flocks. It's such a waste of my time. And it's interesting to observe that nowadays people need to be re-educated by people who have gone through communist hellholes and lived through them in some form or other, at some age or other, explaining, this is a bad idea, right? And now it's really, really deeply entrenched philosophically, saying something like, I prefer blondes to dark-haired women is tantamount to some kind of like, I don't know, blasphemy. It's hilarious. It doesn't make any sense. So my solution to this problem, of course, is I do whatever I want and say whatever I want. I need to play ball in some locations, like for example on YouTube I can't say some things that I would want to say at the time I would want to say it. And even if I'm wrong in saying them, I'm happy to change my mind and everything like that, but that does not matter. I am allowed intrinsically to say and think whatever the heck I want. That's, for example, one of the reasons why I can't possibly live in the United Kingdom. It doesn't matter how much of an affection I have for the United Kingdom and the British people in the British Isles. I'm not allowed to live there because I want to express whatever I want. And it's not allowed there. It simply isn't. And as I've explained before in other videos, the fact that nobody's picked me up on very much of this yet is simply a function of fame. I'm not known enough to bother to ruffle any feathers. But I think the solution to this problem, to the eternal march of communism, which is in the United States, which is in Canada, which is everywhere, right, is to become an individual, a real one, not one that has pink hair and chooses their pronouns and then imposes that on everybody else's. That's not an individual. You're just playing a script. You're boring. Right? It's to become an individual and do precisely what it is that one wants. And of course, at that point, acknowledging that in a world in which everybody does precisely what it is that they want, of course, within reason, set the crime aside, whatever. It's a world in which you must, by golden rule, accept that some people will not like you for who you portray yourself as being. And they have every right not to like you. They have every right not to want to hang out with you. They have every right not to want to help you. They have every right not to want to commerce with you. They have every right not to want to hire you, and so on and so forth, for literally whatever reason they please. Because otherwise, the only alternative is this control from above, with the state being in charge of everything, being absurdly inefficient, wasting all of the money, destroying all sorts of stuff, causing all sorts of wars, and so on and so forth. And one needs to be very aware of the linguistic sleights of hand. Sleight of hands, sleights of hand. One or the other, whatever. Because language is how ideas travel. And the moment in which an idea travels wearing the wrong clothes, well, the wrong idea is propagated. Yeah. Anyway, I thought this particular video was somewhat interesting. I appreciated it. I agree with the chap up there when he says essentially there is a fundamental basic truth, which is some things are better than others. Yes. And that fundamentally almost everybody agrees. Yes. And everybody who doesn't needs to force themselves not to. It's like when you eat something delectable, right? And you go, "Ooh, this is delicious. It's very yummy," right? Now, some people may not like the yummy, but there are general rules that generally apply to an enormous amount of people. And therefore, it's just going to be more common for a lot more people to say, this is excellent. I presume eating excreta is not excellent. But one doesn't need to be caused. Eating plain grass is not excellent. Right? Which is one of the reasons why I think all of these kale juices, etc., need a stupid amount of indoctrination in order to become attractive to people. Right? Whereas eating something sweet or something fatty, for example, is inherently very yummy. Right? And then it gets co-opted by... well, it doesn't really get co-opted. Basically, there's people complaining about the fact that yummy food is too yummy, so they grow fat. And then they shift their responsibility of not eating too much onto the food or the companies, whatever, which is peculiar. But a world that would be much better is a world full of individual personal ownership of everything, the good, bad, and the ugly. After all, if you make your own decisions, even when things happen to you and you make your own decisions, you tend to be, in my personal opinion and experience, much happier than thinking permanently that things happen to you. There is very little you can do about that other than moan. And nobody likes a moaner. A moaner, if you will, is objectively inferior to somebody that brings joy in your life. And on that beautiful pearl of wisdom, I shall conclude this video. Goodbye.